Welcome to Re-Shrinking, the podcast where we review episodes of the show Shrinking on Apple TV and discuss the creation, relevance, and real-life situations highlighted on the show. I'm your host, Carina Cooper.
And I'm your host, Holly Hurley Feather. And this week we're talking about, drumroll please, Season 1, Episode 5, Woof. This episode originally aired on February 17th, 2023. The director was James Ponsalt. The writer is Bill Posley. And Bill is interesting. He's been a writer on some great shows. My favorites being 911 and the iconic Cobra Kai, which I think has been more successful than anybody expected. It made its move from, originally when YouTube had started their own original content channel all the way back to Netflix. And now they've made movies on top of the season, on top of the series, which is super cool, bringing back a property of our era that I was really in love with when I was a kid. And then he was also an actor on the show Glow briefly, which of course I love. I stand an actor who can work with strong women, and certainly the glorious ladies of wrestling are such strong women. And story editor again this week is Sophie Selig.
Excellent.
All right. So, Carina, how are things going for you?
Well, Holly, I am so glad you asked. I am pretty well considering it's been a chaotic week, but things are feeling good. I feel like I'm getting into the swing of things. I'll be on winter break after finals week next week, so I'm getting my stuff done. And I glazed my last piece of pottery last night, and I think it was going to go in the kiln last night. So hopefully all my pieces will be done for class on Thursday. And that's really exciting. It's exciting to get to see something come out of the kiln, especially after you've been working on it for weeks. And I was listening to Michelle Obama's book, The Light We Carry, while I was making this piece. And she talks about how you can make something small that gives you the ability to handle big things. And I'm just rolling with that kind of vibe. Like, you got to do the little stuff, and it helps you deal so much.
Oh man, I think that's probably really true. We had a little bit of a dramatic event on Thanksgiving. We had an unexpected visitor
Wow.
bang on our door after dinner, kind of terrifying. Someone nearby had a psychotic break and were trying to sort of knock down our door, and that person ended up getting help and all that kind of stuff. But we're all sort of a little shaken up over here. So you're so right though. I mean, these like little things, like doing our advent calendars with my kiddo as often as possible, or like, they got their hair dyed yesterday, and just like little things that are bringing us joy right now are kind of holding us together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a silly thing, but it just makes you feel like not safe at home, and you never think about how, even though it's like the best case scenario, and I'm so grateful that everything worked out the way it did, it still like kind of has us off on a weird footing, because like we're just not as comfortable on our street and in our space as we were, Wednesday of last week.
Right. It really brings up the fact that during the holidays, people's mental health tends to plummet. I know that that's true. I'm really sorry that happened to you. That sucks.
Yeah, it was not cool. But you know what? I think one of the things that's kind of been uplifting has been, prepping for the show this week. And, when you watch Shrinking, there's so much comedy layered onto the tragedy, and it helps you remember like the light and the darkness, that it's okay, especially this episode, even though I will say this episode is not one of my favorites. I will be honest up top, but especially what Sean's going through of this idea, that he's unlovable because of these terrible things that he's done, or because of, really traumatic things that have happened to him, and he's really struggling to move on. And to have Paul kind of say like, that's the work, man. Like, that's what it is. It's like you're still loved. So, you know, having Sean go through what he's going through, and then having Jimmy tell him, like, that's the work, you know, like, it's hard. And, you know, everybody has stuff that's not good. You know, everybody has stuff they're getting past, but you're still worth loving, and you're still good. And, you know, like, you're not defined by your past or what's happened to you or what you've done, you know? So, like, and, you know, all the characters kind of finding this laughter and joy on top of all these really kind of heavy life things, like, you know, Gaby's divorce and Paul's Parkinson's and Jimmy's meltdown with his wife dying. You know, it's like, no, they're still all finding joy and lightness and love. And it's okay to have those things in these times.
It is. Yeah.
If not, that's the reason we survive these times, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a key piece, just setting us up, you know, for the theme this week, you know, we're going to be talking about the music in the show, and specifically this week, looking into Tom Howe. Tom Howe leads the music department for Shrinking, and you will be surprised when I list off his credits how familiar you are with this man's vibe, even if this isn't like your primary show, or you haven't identified yourself by other Bill Lawrence shows, because Tom Howe is known for his vibe, obviously, that he set in Ted Lasso, right, which also had music almost, you know, as integral as this show does. And this man has credits, though. I mean, he's got credits from 100 Emmy and BAFTA nominated or winning shows.
Wow.
Right? Kind of incredible. Like, this bro knows how to back a sound, right? His work has been featured on 169 episodes of Great British Bake Off and all of the spinoffs. Great American Bake Off. I mean, at least the ones in English. Great Australian Bake Off. Great, you know, like all the spinoffs, the kids, all of them. He also did the music for Daisy Jones and the Six in all its 70s glory, and several documentaries and series, including Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, which I haven't watched, but I do have some interest in. So his work is all over the place. It's been in documentaries, it's been in, you know, fiction like this show. Really, really cool. So he has game, and it's really easy to see why his music in this series kind of is its own character almost, you know, it's as much a part of this as the setting or anything else, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to like noticing that now in the things that I want. Very cool. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Holly, for that information. And we'll just jump right into the show today. Woof. So we open on Liz and Derek's house. Derek leaves for his day, and he's clearly super tired. And he's like, "You snore." And she's like, "No, I don't." And so he leaves to go off to work. Jimmy comes up, and he shares with Liz that she was right, that Alice does have a crush on Sean. And unbeknownst to Jimmy, Gaby is there. So Liz runs back in the house, grabs her, and she wants her to hear this. So the women give Jimmy all kinds of shit. And then Jimmy suddenly reminds Gaby that the longer she laughs at him, the later she is going to be to pick up Paul for work. And you can just see Gaby's like, oh, fuck, totally forgot. And I'm glad she stayed the night. I mean, they were drinking. But also, I like this new bonding with Liz and Gaby. It's really fun. So I thought this was cute too. Jimmy looks on, giving the Home Alone face. And he walks by the car, and Derek's totally asleep in the car.
I love at the end of the scene, he goes, "Your husband's asleep in the car." And Liz is like, "He's not bothering anybody." Right? Just leave him. Well, he says your husband's asleep in the driveway. In reality, he's asleep in the car, but it's really funny.
Yeah,
it is funny. He's not bothering anybody. Just.
And then we cut to Paul. He's on the phone with Meg. He's also walking down the sidewalk, and he's puzzling out what to get Mason, his grandson, for his birthday. She hears him say, "She's not here," and Meg wonders, what the hell? He tells her that his coworker is taking him to work, but she's not there. And Meg seems to suspect. She's suspicious about why would someone be taking you to work, and he just assures her that his car's in the shop. Gaby arrives, and she's honking her horn and driving up, rushing. She gets out and just apologizes and says, "I gotta go take a shower. I'll be just a minute. I gotta get a shower and make a smoothie," or whatever, a green drink, I think she called it.
She's like, "I'm gonna make a green juice," and like, "You want one?" She's listing off all these things that she has to do, and you're like, "Oh my God, they're never leaving."
And then Paul's like, "Well,
Oh, yeah. I also love, the coin of the episode, when Gaby and Jimmy in the last scene are having the conversation about Gaby being late for work. And he goes, I hope he woofs at you.
Oh.
And then he tells Liz, like, when Paul's disappointed, he woofs at you.
Oh, it's so fun. Then we cut to Jimmy. He enters the kitchen to find Alice complimenting Sean on his new driver's license photo. And Jimmy, of course, you can see in his face, he's remembering Alice saying how Sean is so beautiful. He tries to also compliment Sean because Alice is saying, tell him it's good. And it gets weird so fast. And Alice leaves after super awkwardness. And Jimmy's obviously still remembering the confession. So Sean's oblivious about the whole thing with Alice and Jimmy. He doesn't cotton in at all. A lot of times he will kind of look, and like you see he's suspecting. In this scene, he doesn't at all. He's just in his own world. And so Sean gets a text and tells Jimmy his dad has been pressuring to see him. Sean doesn't want to. And he says 1 minute his dad's kicking him out and the other he's supposed to be all nice and stuff. And Jimmy shares that he also has a tough relationship with Paul. So there's this dual thing going on, a father figure, right, for both of them. And he seizes the opportunity to encourage them both to grab these relationships by the balls. And again, he's getting really weird. He's making weird and physical approximations. And
and then Alice comes downstairs and he's doing this, like in front of Sean's balls, like holding giant balls in his hands, like in front of Sean, and Alice is like, why are you so weird? Why do you make everything weird?
Yeah. And, their banter is just so funny. And he's like, why do I have to go see my dad? And he's like, because sitting around being resentful hasn't gotten us anywhere. And so Jimmy tells Sean this is what moving forward looks like. And so that's, a good theme to look at.
Yeah, definitely. And you definitely see that as a theme sort of for the whole episode, is that everyone really wants to move forward. But I think in this episode, you also see so many people who are stuck, who are sort of in their moment of stuckness. And I think that might be why it's not like people do kind of break through towards the end, but you also I think that's why it's not one of my favorites, because it's sort of everybody in their moment of stuckness getting called out,
Yeah, that's very true. So then we cut to Gaby in her office with a couple she is counseling. And this is really the first time we see Gaby with patients, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're talking about dreams, and she's pointing out that they lived together for a long time without having any problems. But now that they're married, they can't just leave. So it gets so much tougher. She counsels them to share their insecurities with each other. And when the client asks, do you and your husband do that? Her reply being, you betcha. And her own response convinces her she needs to go see Paul and talk this out.
So Gaby eventually wants to go talk to Paul, right? And she goes in, and Paul, ever the pragmatist, sort of basically says, gets Gaby to really talk honestly about her marriage. And she's like, what the hell is I going to tell them? Like, marriage will inevitably suck your soul. And Paul, of course, is ever the pragmatist, is like, marriage is an outdated institution that subjugates women and sells air fryers, and she's like, and he's like, they have this conversation about whether or not he's her mentor. And she's like, no, you're Jimmy's mentor. You're not my mentor. If I was going to pick a mentor, I'd pick somebody who looks a lot more like me. And, I had put down a little bit of trivia in this episode, and we'll get to some of it, kind of towards the end. But I thought this was really interesting. Mark from Gaby's couple session is Twofer from the show 30 Rock. And so I just can't not see him as Twofer. Even though he's not Twofer, right. But then also, when Gaby talks about finding someone who looks like her, less than 5.3% of psychologists and therapists are Black women. And so Gaby really is truly a unicorn, and finding a mentor more like her would be so hard.
Do you know anybody more therapeutic to visit with than Black women? I mean, they bring so much.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I have this theory that all good white people were at one point in their life saved by a Black woman. That is my theme is that, you know, white women do not exist without Black women. We cannot survive on, I mean, white people just, we cannot survive on our own. We've had too many centuries of colonizing and all this sort of stuff, you know. But I at least in my personal life have been saved by Black women so many times now. I consider it sort of my personal mission that, you know, if I have a friend who is a Black woman who needs any sort of help, if there's any I can provide, I want to be there, because I'm like, you know, I owe my life to Black women, and I think most white people would say the same. So yes, I agree. And I think there's probably no one you could trust more, because there's probably no one who's been through more in the history of time.
And it's like if you want to talk adversity and getting through adversity, you couldn't find a segment of the population more in tune with that process, shall we say.
Yes. But then of course this like conversation is interrupted by Jimmy, who, you know, tries not to go in there because he knows Paul's not talking to him, but then ultimately cannot help himself, and he comes storming in, and he really wants to talk about Grace, right? Because he's really feeling Grace doing backsliding, you know, with Donnie after the last episode, and, you know, and he really wants to talk about it. And Paul says, no, he buzzes him. He goes,
the buzzing. Oh.
And he reiterates, right, that he's not going to do it. And then I love Jimmy does the little, like, his lips are sealed, you know, okay, fine, I'm not going to talk to you either. And his lips are sealed, and he throws it to Gaby. Gaby's like, I don't want this.
Yeah, but she catches it. I love that so much.
She catches it anyway.
Yeah, that was fun. And her laughing. What? She was laughing at something, and someone turns to her and says, "Don't laugh." But she's like, "It was funny." Was it because he buzzed her?
It probably was.
Oh man!
It probably was when he buzzed her. I totally didn't even catch that. I love that you caught that.
It's so cute when she laughed. And it didn't look scripted at all. It looked like it just caught her, right? Like it was infectious, like little burst that just come out of her, and I love that. It's so fun.
Oh, that makes me so happy. However, even though Gaby seems to back Paul in the moment, the second Jimmy leaves, she tells Paul that he's a real dick sometimes. And then I love that just pure Harrison Ford. His response is sometimes.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Nice.
Then we cut to a happy morning with Charlie and Brian. It's so cute. Brian's like, do I look like Smithers? Because he's got this bow tie on. His husband, Charlie, or not his husband, his boyfriend. He's
his boyfriend, Charlie. Sorry.
He says it's cute. He's like, you didn't even look. You didn't even look at me. And he's like, I just love you. It's a really cute little scene. And then we find Brian has gone to Jimmy and Gaby. Brian, tone definitely mentions the divorce and dead wife, but asserts that he needs their support in proposing to Charlie. And they're rolling their eyes. They're just not even really paying any attention. We find out he's done this a million times. We, the viewer, don't realize that Brian always says he's going to do this. They call him a baby bitch, debate the use of sorry, not sorry, although Jimmy nails it when he leaves the kitchen. It was pretty great. And then Brian says he'll buy a fucking ring and rub their fucking faces in it. We will see what happens.
And then Gaby goes, yeah, tell that to your grandchildren. That's a great story for the grandkids. And then I bought a fucking ring and rubbed in their fucking faces. So good.
And then we see Sean at the park with his dad and his younger brother throwing a football. His brother is skipping art class. When they give him a present, it's his medals framed, which really upsets him. You can just see everything fall because he was having kind of a nice time there. It really throws Sean off. His dad tells him he's a hero, and Sean's just like, I'm out. And he has to be somewhere he can't stay anymore, and his dad's confused by this. But, I mean, carry the one. Framed medals from the war that you're completely traumatized by. He's pretty upset when he leaves.
It's crazy, though, because, you know, my dad was a Vietnam vet and a Purple Heart recipient. I mean, my dad was a hero. My dad was cool, but I mean, he also struggled with his service just like a lot of guys do, because it is an intense experience. It's not, I mean, war's murder, you know, and it's not, you know, and then to have someone tell you you're a hero, like on one hand, you need to hear that because you have to live the rest of your life with what you've done. And so for a lot of guys, the medals, the recognition help them process and move forward. But for some, it actually brings up the part of the war that they least want to remember. It drags them back into that like hellscape.
Yeah.
And they can't get away from the things that they've done, and they can't forgive themselves, and it doesn't hit in the same way. And so it's kind of strange because, you know, you can tell that Sean's dad's really trying to do a good thing here,
Yeah.
but instead he just completely isolates Sean all over
Yeah,
again.
it's pretty hard to watch. Sean then being upset, he thinks of Alice, like he texts Alice to go for a walk. Now Alice skips school, and can I just say, she's walking down the hall with Summer and says, "Cover me with Mr. So-and-so." How? How does that work? Do you just go to school? Oh yeah, she's just in the bathroom, or what? I mean, when I was watching it, I was like, okay, cover me with my
Yeah,
teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, I was okay. So I literally put in the trivia, I had like a
Oh,
whole paragraph about skipping
okay,
school.
great.
And I'm sure that we're going to get into this, but like I am an angel. I have always been an angel, but a big part of being an angel is that I realized very early on I don't do things small, and therefore I will always get caught, right? I am, because I'm the kind of person who, like, when I achieve all the things. And so like I'm visible, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I'm not the kind of person, the energy you ignore, which means if I'm not in class, they know. So the skipping scene threw me so hard because I was like, that can't possibly be a common experience. Like, but then I looked it up and it turns out I am truly approved. Approximately 40 to 50% of high school and college students report skipping class at least once, with many more skipping less frequently, meaning like 1 or 2 times, right? I had a teacher try to expel me once because I held up a Dole sign at a Clinton rally. And by the way, Bill Clinton told me he'd literally, he shook my hand afterwards and said he'd defend my right to hold that sign as president, right? So yeah, I didn't skip school. I was an incredibly good kid, you know what I mean? And like one time I went home with a headache and I called and told my mom, and she did not cover for me in any way, and I got detention. So my husband's sitting beside me during the scene. He's like, "Cover for you? Like, how does that even work? Like, nobody's going to cover. There's no covering for you with the teacher." So like, just so you know, we're all on the same page there. It's like, there's no covering for you. Either you'll get a consequence or you won't. But like, you know, like your friends can't cover for you.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
We'll see.
as we'll find out, it does not work.
Exactly.
Yeah. But continue. Not to mention, if you were going to ask somebody to cover for you, I imagine teachers don't trust Summer.
No, she doesn't
between
seem
us chickens.
exactly. What's the word? Responsible? Yeah.
Yes.
So then we see Brian buy a ring, and
did he actually buy it? I think he bought it, right?
Because didn't he have
He was
it?
at the store. It seemed like he bought it, right? But then later, when there's pressure around it, he doesn't actually pull it out.
Right.
So I have doubt now, and I
I'm
don't
not
remember
sure
what
either.
happens here.
And I was still thinking, I saw him looking at the rings and seeming like he didn't really even like them. And then I was still thinking about Summer trying to cover for, my mind was still there. Like, right? The show kept
We're all
going, and I
distracted by
know
the skipping.
it's too bad.
Us being parents is really feeding into our review of this episode.
It's true. It's absolutely true. You can't unring that bell.
Nope.
And so then we see Paul, and he sees a client that seems deeply stuck. He goes to Gaby's office after to debrief, and Gaby calls him out on seeking her out as sloppy seconds, because usually he would talk to Jimmy about this kind of stuff, but since they're not talking, he's not going to him. She has this moment where she's like, "I've been waiting so long for this, and I can't let you do this." And so before she falls prey to his attention, she kicks him out of the office. Yeah, I love the part in the scene where he draws the attention to the scrunchies on her lamp, and she's like, it softens the lines, and get out. You know, like she's still trying to tell him to get out, but almost compulsively answering his questions. Like, don't talk about my stickers on my laptop. Like, go. And so it's cute. And she's struggling. She wants so badly for this connection with Paul, and she can't let herself have that, even though he's right there
Oh my
ready.
God. Well, and then the way she puts it, she's like, you come in here with your you up energy and you expect me to just drop my panties. And of course, Paul is thoroughly confused. He's like, what is happening? And she's like, no, I am not your sloppy seconds. Get out of here. And then you catch her. She's like, get out of here before I Paul paraded this. Like, she even lets him know, like, you know, this isn't okay. And you need to help me not fall prey to what you're doing right now. And so much so that right before she shuts the door, she's like, which patient? No. And she like shuts the door, you know, like she wants to ask which patient. She's like, which person? No, I can't do it, you know? But I love that in that moment, she like, basically what she's done is compared his attention to a booty call. Like, you need somebody and the person you want isn't available. And so you're texting me at midnight, basically, is what him coming to her office is.
Yeah. Parallel lines. Yeah. We're back with Jimmy now, and he confronts Grace by booking a property showing under the name Kevin Lactate. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at making up fake names. And he's truly terrible. I mean, so he's there, he's at and she's like, I can't talk to you right now. I have an open house. And he's like, yeah, it's with me. And so he's forced his way into her realm. He's going to view this house so he can talk to her. And then he gets a notice on his phone. He finds out that Alice has skipped school, and he mentions that to her. She said, oh, I skipped school. It was back when I was in Donnie's car having sex. And Jimmy's like, oh, fuck. And like before that, I don't think he was as worried about Alice skipping. But I love the moment where she goes, oh, not that Donnie. This was the Donnie before that. I mean, like, she has a thing for Donnie. It's hilarious. And so when he gets this picture of Alice in his mind doing something awful like that, according to him, and knowing that she has this history with Connor and thinks maybe. So he books it out of there.
Yeah, he's like running. And then, of course, we cut to where Alice actually is.
Right. So now we see Sean walking with Alice, and they come to the water tower. I have seen these in towns and stuff, and, you know, usually there's a more secure gate around these things, or sometimes they're just right in the middle of a park.
Well, there is now.
Right?
There is now, because, you know, when we were kids, there was like a whole sort of genre, sort of this like John Mellencamp country music genre of the water tower being like the place you would go. Like, it was even in the movie not Almost Famous, Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused,
right? It was even in the movie Dazed and Confused, right? Where they all climb the water tower. Yeah. Like, that was like an iconic thing when we were kids. And I think now water towers have all that kind of stuff around them for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, they went and sensationalized those things. And of course, Sean, he starts to climb, and it freaks Alice out really bad. She's like, please don't, and be careful. And he's really reckless in this scene. I was like, oh, because it looked real. Now, I don't know how they shot that, but it looked like he was dangling up there, just hanging by his hands and his feet swinging, and he's so happy. And he's like, woo, it feels so good. Like, you could hear his inner dialogue going, this is great. I love this. This is thrilling. It's horrific for Alice. Alice comes home to find Jimmy on the phone and demanding an explanation. He calls her young lady, and she's like, oh, you can't be serious. And so now she calls him out that she had to clean up cocaine for him a month ago off of the photographs. And
the photograph of her Nana or something like that.
Yeah.
Like there, she calls her grandma or Mima.
Yeah, I think it was Mima. I didn't know if that was a reaction to him calling her young lady. Like,
it certainly seems so. It seemed like those were that was very much her knee-jerk reaction of, don't you young lady me.
Exactly.
Like, you're not that dad. Nice try.
Yeah. She tells him about Sean doing that, and I mean, so he does kind of back off as far as any kind of reprimand. Although, you know, I kind of have a bone to pick about that with Alice, because is she going to do that every time that he gets her? She should be in trouble. Is she just going to escape any consequence by throwing his behavior back in his face, which is also not a great thing. She lets him know that she's really worried about Sean, and that kind of redirects everybody. So then we see Brian, Liz, and Gaby, and they're hiking. And they're in that beautiful place where they always go to hike. And of course, Liz wants to pick up rocks. She's kind of scouring around for them. The two of them quiz Brian on the engagement because, of course, Gaby has told Liz all about it. They demand to see the ring, and now Gaby calls out his trauma-informed avoidance. He tries to divorce shame her. Liz backs Gaby, and then he apologizes and bails. And then Gaby tells Liz she's still not looking for rocks. I love the part of this scene where she brings up the basketball. Oh, like the basketball you didn't have, or you bought, and they go clapping at Brian. Show the ring. Yeah, it was.
Yep, show the ring. Show that. She's like, oh, this reminds me of the basketball you brought that you didn't really bring, And then they're like, okay, can we clap at him? And then they clap at him. And even before he bails, like he's clearly like not ready to be accosted about this, but he says to them, I love this part where he goes, they're like, they do the show the ring, and then like he divorce shames Gaby, and Liz stands up for Gaby, and he's like, okay, I hate this. Whatever this is really working for you two, but I hate it and I'm getting out of here. And then he also apologizes, like, I'm sorry, that I divorce shamed you, but then he like runs away.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Like, you two as friends, this is good. Like, but I hate them.
Yeah, like this is really working for you two, but also right now it's really working against me. So bye.
Yep. So then we cut to Jimmy. He finds Sean moping in the hot tub. He says, hot tubs are supposed to make people happy. Now Sean is mad at Jimmy for asking what happened. He starts to move out and says he'll be gone in the morning. It's like you said, keep moving forward. So he's throwing Jimmy's board back at him. It was cute. Jimmy goes, you're supposed to be happy, And he's like, what makes you think I'm not happy? And,
what makes you fucking think I'm not fucking happy, right? Like he says fucking like way more than that sentence. And he's like, well, number one, the way you said that. Number two, the way you put fucking in front of every fucking word.
Yeah, it was great. The dialogue, the show.
Well, and and Sean has a point here in some ways, but realistically, he doesn't. He's a little defensive, right? Because he tells Jimmy, like, you said you weren't going to push. And that comes up a couple more times. Oh, you said you weren't going to push. You said you weren't going to push. And it's like, buddy, like asking you what happened and Jimmy calls him out and says like, hey, I'm the doctor here. You're the one hanging from the water tower. You do attention seeking, dangerous behavior. And I hear you, that's my job, basically. And Sean's kind of like, well, the lines are blurred and you're right. I shouldn't be living here. And just like, and says he'll be out by the morning. And clearly Jimmy's hurt by that, right? But then Sean takes the parting shot of, it's like you said, just keep moving forward.
Nothing like throwing something back in your face, especially when it's legit. You really do need to move forward, but you're using that as an angle to hurt.
Not move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's also using it, right? He's using it to keep from moving forward.
And to be resentful, because that's just so rewarding to be resentful in that moment. You're like, okay. So cut to Alice, and she's spilling to Paul about how furious she is that Sean isn't talking to her, and neither is Jimmy. And now Paul isn't speaking to Jimmy. Paul tries to assert that he doesn't agree with Sean living with them, and Alice says, who the fuck cares? She's like, I could only move forward because Dad had you, and now he doesn't. Why do you have to be such an asshole? See, you could be mad and sit down. Oh, okay, so this is really cute. She's like pacing back and forth, ranting. And then Paul's like, will you sit down? She goes, I'm mad. He's like, you can sit and be mad. I'm mad all the time, and I mostly sit, or whatever he says. And so she does sit and screams at him. Like, not screams at him. Do you know what I mean? She's like ranting at him. And she's right. He abandoned her dad. He abandoned him because he didn't agree with what he was doing. And he is his mentor. I see why he's upset with Jimmy. He did exactly the opposite of what Paul wanted him to do. But also, you don't just let that ship run aground,
I mean, I think he kind of had to, though, because when he talked to Jimmy about it and he told him to stop doing it, Jimmy said, I'm an emotional vigilante. I'm going to do it. Like, I'm doing this with or without your approval. And so in Paul's defense, I mean, the next step is cutting him off, because what are you going to do? He's not listening. You may be his mentor,
True.
but if he's not listening to you. And so I'm kind of in Paul's camp here. And like, again, like, radical empathy is sort of what this show consists upon, because, you know, per my like infamous first hot take that I feel that all other hot takes are built on, is that Jimmy breaks things so badly that they shouldn't be fixed. He shouldn't get empathy in these moments. He shouldn't get sympathy, but he does, because the people in his life are amazing enough to understand that we all do unforgivable things, and at times don't deserve the redemption we're getting.
Yeah. Ah, man, you can tell that this show is really compelling because every character has a point. Like, they're all right, you know, in varying degrees. Everyone has a side that you can see. You can see where they're coming
Alice
from.
also just is his hat here, which I'm just putting into the notes because that's going to come up later. Like, you know, and oh my God, her face, her livid, angry face in this moment, was so good.
Yeah.
This, I mean, she's such a good actress, and like, holding your own in scenes with Harrison Ford cannot be easy. But the two of them have this wonderful chemistry and rapport that's age appropriate, that's, you know, relationship in the show appropriate, that just zings. And the way she's angry with him and he's impressed by her, but also like a little hurt in this moment, is so gorgeous. And then, of course, she just is the hat. She's like, you know, that hat's stupid. That hat looks stupid or something. And he's like, well, you're like, now you're just lying to hurt me.
And the way he says, well, now you're just lying to hurt me. It's so cute. And I'm sorry I keep using that word, but it's so funny how he's saying this in the real moment of his real life. Those words aren't scripted. I mean, it might have been scripted for all I know, but it doesn't come off that way at all. That's just Harrison Ford being offended and trying to put words.
It was well done. It was really well done. I assumed it was acting, but I also, like, I think, you know, maybe it's him who said it, but somebody at some point said that this character is so close to who he is that he has to do very little acting or something.
Yeah, right.
I find it really charming.
Right. And so then we cut to Brian.
This is the scene, by the way. We're coming to the scene where I fall in love with Brian. It's the line at the end of this scene into the next one with Gaby a little bit.
Okay, great. Brian comes into the office for Gaby to help him with his trauma. He admits that he was the gayest boy in Texas.
Ooh, and Gaby gets so excited, and she like gets out her notebook and runs over. She's like, "Yes, you're here. It's happening." You know, like.
I do love this moment. He's really vulnerable right now. You never see him vulnerable because, I mean, he's the everything goes my way guy. So then we cut to Sean. He's packing up. He is going to move out. Jimmy asks questions. They're in the middle of this, and Paul shows up with beers from Jimmy's fridge. And he's like, "You want one?" And this is a nice moment. Obviously, Alice got to him. And he's like, okay, well, since it's now affecting Alice and I want to make sure we're taking care of her, we have to insert ourselves in this. Also, Sean needs help.
Well, and there's this beautiful triangulation in that moment around Alice where you know that these men are, all three of them realistically, but especially Jimmy and Paul, are stepping up for Sean because of Alice. You know, like they know that Alice's infatuation with Sean is one-sided, and they know that he's older and that it's not appropriate, but they step up for Sean anyway because of Alice.
Right.
You know, it's a weird way to get the inciting incident for these three men to end up together like this. But my God, like, I think well done, because they can use Alice in that way, because everybody in the show cares about Alice more than anything. Yep. You know, she's the trigger you can pull for every single one of these adults.
Right. That's absolutely
that hits them right where they need to be hit. And this is just, they make it such a short little cut in that Brian scene and this Sean scene. They're going to cut back and forth, and they're going to do a lot of heavy lifting in these two scenes against each other, where they're just sort of cutting them in and out. And so I did the best that I could to kind of capture the bulk of each of them, but the beginnings of each of them, they do, like, it's almost two lines.
Yeah, right. It's so quick. Very, very quick. And so then we cut back to Brian, and he's telling Gaby he was afraid to be gay
He
in
was
college.
afraid, sorry.
And Gaby's like, a straight Brian sounds really hot. Of course, she's like, everyone's gay in college. His parents still have not come around. And this is painful for him. Gaby pokes at him as to how this led to him being Mr. Everything Goes My Way, and he admits that he doesn't take risks so that everything does go his way. He realizes Charlie could say no, and then they come to the fact that Gaby would get married again even though her marriage was a straight dumpster fire. She said she was glad she did it. They hold hands and agree that Gaby nailed his trauma-informed avoidance. She asks what sex with straight Brian was like, and he's like, 20 minutes of me pleasuring you, then leaving before it's my turn. Of course, she says, that's perfect. You sound perfect. Marry me.
Which is like, it was so tight and so sweet, you know, like that is not the way it happens in therapy. This would be a conversation that happened over months, or even in friendship, right? Yeah. Like maybe you have, sometimes with friends, you have these like deep ones that come out of nowhere because you've been wrestling with something for so long. But like there is something like him going from, I was the gayest kid in Texas to I was afraid to be gay in college. And Gaby's like, everybody was gay in college. And he was like, well, you know, my parents were super religious and I was nervous to tell them, and I really hoped that they would come around, but I didn't think at this age I would still be waiting. Oh, yeah. And so you find out that like coming out to that, he didn't take the risk. He was scared to take the risk. He took the risk, and then it didn't work out. And he's like, so I don't take risks anymore. Yep. And that's why everything always goes my way.
It's powerful.
And Charlie could say no. And if he does, I can't handle that. And so like they just boom, 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 go through so much in this. And then about her divorce and her having to, in the middle of this trauma, be transparent enough and be kind of see herself in the future enough to say, I would have done it anyway. She has to act as if though she's healed enough to tell him that she would have done it, even now knowing what she knows, even knowing that everything fell apart with Nico and, you know, and his addiction and all the trouble, that like, even though her marriage was a straight dumpster fire, she would do it again. Like giving him in that moment what he needs to move forward.
Yeah.
Even though for all intents and purposes, she's not moved fully forward yet.
It's big talk from Gaby, but she believes it about herself, I think. Yeah, that's a really, I'm glad you said that about even with friends, this wouldn't go this way. Like, truly, when you call your friend out sometimes it's like, this leads to a huge escalation, and suddenly you might not be as good of friends anymore. When you can see very clearly what your friend is dealing with, and or their avoidance, their denial, their whatever it is, it's difficult. So she's an amazing therapist. Brian shows up and
a really good freaking friend to be able to do this for Brian, even though, you know, like she said, it's so annoying because even when they were on the walk, like whenever she challenges Brian comes for her neck. You know, when he knew that they were not gonna be excited about the "you're gonna propose to Charlie" thing because he says it over and over again. So he came in swinging. He was like, "Hey, I know this isn't the right time because of your divorce and then he can't even say it while looking Jimmy in the eye, and Jimmy just goes, "Dead wife." You know, and so what we are learning about Brian is that when Brian feels vulnerable, he lashes out a little bit. And he apologizes because he loves his friends, but he lashes out.
Yeah, he does.
In a not cool way.
He's bish. What a little bitch.
What a little baby bitch.
All right, so now, cut back to Paul. He picks up the medals as he sits with Sean and Jimmy. He says that he's worked with a lot of vets, and they don't give these out like candy. He wants to know what Sean did to earn them. When Sean demurs, he convinces him that answering will make Jimmy mad. So Paul's like, I'll give you another incentive to do this. So Sean tells him, then says he doesn't want the medals. Paul admits that he has Parkinson's and won't tell his daughter. He doesn't want to be sad, a sad old man that needs to be taken care of. He feels stuck. Sean says he wasn't a hero. He was pointing guns at kids. Paul tells him he was a scared, shitless 21-year-old kid. Sean admits he hates himself. What is he to do? And Paul says the work. And he tells him he's lucky to have Jimmy, also that Paul is here for him. And then he leaves. And Sean tells Jimmy, Paul is way better than you at this kind of shit. And Paul leaves, he jokes with Alice that, what, all of a sudden you're an expert on hats?
Which totally, I think, ties in the point that you were making about Alice got to him, you know, and they wanted to make sure that we saw that, right? Because you see this moment between these three guys, and you might be thick enough to take it at, you know, to take it as maybe Paul also misses Jimmy, or like maybe Alice got to him, but there was a lot of other stuff going on, right? But they want to make sure that no, Alice got to him. And so they give you that little tag at the end. But I also love that moment because when Paul stands up and looks at Sean and is like, and if you need me, I'm here for you. You can tell that's a reach for Paul because Paul is Mr. Fortress of Solitude. And so then like for Sean to look at Jimmy and be like, he's way better than you at this kind of shit. And Paul goes like, no shit. Or like, no doubt. You know, like, yeah, you know, but like, it's certainly that moment of like, ooh, maybe I'm not what you need. Maybe Paul is what you need. Like maybe you need me as a friend and Paul as a therapist is what I, you know, and it seems like Paul is really setting up for him to be the friend and Jimmy to be the therapist. But I feel like the dynamic there may be a little bit different.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so then kind of coming full circle, Paul at home, he calls Meg. You can tell he's ready to try to do the work himself and push through and do this, move forward and tell his daughter about his Parkinson's. We can only assume what's going on because this is where the episode ends. He says, honey, I've got something I want to tell you. I know. These episodes, I weep.
Yeah. And they just, I mean, they give you so much. Woof.
Yeah, so that is the end of the episode. For our listeners, if you'd like to join us in our conversation next week, be sure to watch the episode coming up, episode 6, Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah.
Right on. Holly, let's segue into our next segment where Holly gives us some trivia. Take it, Holly.
I love it. Okay, so just a little bit of trivia here, not too much today, but I love that the music in the opening scene is such a bop and it leads into just some sort of general background music. But I did find out when I was doing some research that the song Me is in this episode uncredited. And just for those of you who are Swifties like myself, that song is by the 1975, which is the band of Taylor Swift's epically toxic ex, Maddie Healy, you know, or whatever you want to call their engagement that led to an amazing album on her part. But, you know, the 1975, good band, good music, and the song Me is featured in this episode, which is really cool. So I thought that was really rad. And I really, I also had to look up the hot tub stats. So these are hot tub stats that every hot tub sales website, I cannot even find the nexus of this data. And it starts with hot springs, like with people reported from hot springs. But apparently to these sites, hot tubs really do make people happy. Apparently there is a mood boosting effect that happens after, you know, sitting in warm water, as well as reducing stress. And there's a combination of physical and emotional benefits that go through that. The warm water is supposed to trigger the release of endorphins, which are the body's natural mood elevators, while also lowering cortisol, which is what your stress hormones produce that make you feel really low. And then, of course, additionally, people do find that hot tub is a social setting and a ritual for relaxation that can improve emotional well-being that way, and then sometimes also sleep. So I'll be honest, I buy it.
I love a hot tub. I feel so much better after soaking in a hot tub. I always thought it was because it relaxed me, you know. The warm water, I thought it was good for my muscles and, you know, just overall sense of well-being.
It's interesting because I talked about it with my acupuncturist, and he talks about how in Chinese medicine they believe that your head should be cool and the rest of your body warm. You know, like cooler heads prevail, right? As being like a statement on like when you're hot-headed and you're worked up, you're angry. But also just physically, they believe that like your head should be cooler than the rest of your body. And so I thought that was really interesting because then when I was having nosebleeds over the last like couple of years, I'm sorry, I should have given a warning for anyone who's triggered by that kind of talk. But, you know, when I was on my health journey the past couple of years, I found that I've taken an increased amount of baths because it does seem to pull some of the congestion and some of the like, you know, blood out of your head and into the rest of your body, because obviously, you know, it's warm and things move,
Yeah.
molecules move where it's
Mhm.
warmer. So I've always thought that that's interesting. So I kind of buy it, that's me on that point. Also, sorry, a lot of the I got some of the numbers in earlier, like what percent of therapists are Black
Mhm.
ladies, so I got some of my trivia in earlier. So a lot of this is just going to be, at least this part is going to be a little bit of Holly's backstory. But I'm originally from East Texas, and I was severely Texas triggered when Brian was like, I was the gayest man in Texas. I still have gay friends who live in Texas, and I frequently am like, get out of
Yeah.
there.
How
Your life
scary.
is you in danger, girl.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. Like you in danger, girl. Like get out of there. What are
Right.
you doing? People do not like that there. They are not
Mm-mm.
good. They are not good about it. The rest of the country is way better.
Yeah.
Why are you subjecting yourself to hatred
Yeah.
unnecessarily? And I really hate that. I really hate that for people who still live there. And I also really appreciated what Brian said, because I think I also went through some of that when I was initially getting married. I
Mm.
think maybe because I had such a traditional upbringing, I had never really seen myself as the kind of person who was going to get married and have kids. I didn't necessarily know if that was in the cards for me. And in my 20s, I really struggled with that. And when I met my husband, I remember having to go through worst case scenario thinking to really let myself go ahead, do what I wanted to do, which was marry him, And I had to think about, like, okay, either we break up now, or we divorce, or one of us cheats, or one of us dies, or both of us die, or, and I was like, but either way, it's going to end. And that is not a good reason not to take this adventure now,
Yeah. But
as everything
wow.
ends. And I literally had to go to the darkest place to get myself to do the lightest thing,
Yeah, that I was gonna say
to
that.
take a risk like that. Because to me,
That was really
yeah, it felt
heavy.
like a big risk, because especially as a woman, you give up so much of your life when you get married. And I didn't ever think I was going to give up so much of my life. I really thought that I was marrying someone who would support that journey. But even when you have a supportive spouse, it is very rare that you level each other up. It is almost always the case that you then have to become the support person for a while, or the other person becomes the support person, and neither. It's a lot of compromise.
Yeah.
And the key word about a good compromise is that everybody doesn't get what they want.
Right. Exactly. And usually it fluctuates. Sometimes it's one way, and the other times it's the other way. On January 26th, I'll have been married 25 years.
Woo.
No, 35.
Oh my God, Carina.
35 years.
So y'all got married when you were like 6.
Thank you. Yeah. I wasn't even old enough to drink. I was 20. I was 20. But I
Baby.
definitely drank on my honeymoon. I was like on a train headed to San Francisco, and the bar card did not card me. So there you go. I was an old married woman by that time.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
uh,
Yeah, it is. You can see, and I struggle with that also, because I really, really hate failing. Failing is like my biggest fear, which they say is a fear of fear, but it is rough, right? And so I felt very seen in the scene with Brian, where he's like, I don't know if because if you're someone that everything always goes your way, oof, I mean, there's no quicker way to ensure that everything is not going to go your way than getting married.
that's a good point. Wow. Right?
Because even if you're just married and you don't have any kids or anything, that's still your partner. Sometimes things have to go your
Yep.
partner's way, and that's
Yeah.
not your way. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't say it so broadly, but there's a lot of that there too. So Brian really, really became sort of this I realize is the episode where Brian kind of stepped into my mind as sort of one of my favorite characters, because I also grew up in Texas, also didn't fit conventional boundaries. Granted, I am not a gay man, so I cannot claim, I have cishet privilege,
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that I was never a good girl.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yep.
Not like I mean, I wasn't a good girl, even though I did all the right things. Like I said, I was a total angel, but that even in and of itself was considered a certain kind of rebellion, because I was expected to be mediocre, not exceptional. And I was not expected to have the standards and the values and the pushback that someone needs to become exceptional. And so even in that, I loved playing sports, which was, I wanted to play sports with the boys, which was not cool by adults. It was kind of get in your box, wear your ribbons, what's your problem? Look sexy, but not too sexy, all that kind of stuff, church culture, the whole shebang. And a lot of it I opted into real hard because I wanted to be the best at everything, including being a good girl. And I wasn't a good girl. And that was always really hard for me,
Yeah.
So I so much of Brian I saw myself in. So that was good. And then this is actually something to know if there's someone in your life who has Parkinson's. Paul's struggle here is actually very common. What you find from Parkinson's experts is that they actually really do struggle with telling their families because it will change their relationship, right? Just like kind of how Sean's worried that if people really knew that what he did, overseas, that he couldn't be lovable because he was scary. He was the bad guy in somebody else's story in a big, serious, bad way.
Right.
And Paul's struggle is more that he will no longer be he says he'll no longer be the father, he'll be a burden. And that's actually very common. A lot of times people with Parkinson's delay telling their families until way too late because they don't want to be a burden. They realize there's a stigma. So then every single thing that happens in their life, everyone in their life, kind of like what happened with the driving, right? His initial read was sort of that he was being treated unfairly, but in the back of his mind, he knew he wasn't safe, right? And so they worry that then every time you forget a detail, they'll be like, oh, this the Parkinson's getting worse. Is it escalating? Do I need to move him in? And that all of a sudden the misinterpretation of symptoms will start. And they don't want to upset loved ones because they're worried that their relationships will change, their roles will change, and they will, right? Eventually. And that is a really valid fear. And they do this so much that most Parkinson's websites actually have a whole section just dedicated to dealing with the ways your relationships are going to change due to your diagnosis. Yeah. And I think it's something we just don't think of, because there's a caregivers network at Kimberly Clark when I worked there that was really active and I was very active in. And so many adults were dealing with this with their parents. And a part of it is that, their parent generation, the silent generation, was literally, just everybody has struggles. Shut up, keep it to yourself. Which meant, of course, then by the time they intercepted their parents, things had gone so far down a path and the communication is so bad that there was no helping them. And I think, they're challenging Paul in this show not to go that way. Because I think our parents' generation have some hold over that. I know that my dad, towards the end told nobody anything. And then by the time he was dying, my mother was just shocked. And the rest of us were like, well, we could see the signs. And my mom was like, I did not see the signs. Yeah. I was totally snowed by him telling me he was fine.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the book that I'm listening to, Michelle Obama, she talked about her dad. At first it was like he had to use a cane to keep his balance, and everybody saw the cane, but it's just a tool, it didn't mean anything else. And then the further it progressed, they kind of knew in the back of their minds, and her mother certainly knew, but the kids didn't. Her and her brother Craig didn't really see it that way, although I think she was talking about how she thinks she knew but did her best to not know.
She and Craig talk a little bit about that on their podcast about because I think both of them are getting better at talking about it and understanding it more as they've had to talk about it in the public eye so much. And woof, woof, if you will.
Thank you so much for that trivia. Now is our segment, Cringe of the Week. This week I'm up for Cringe of the Week. Sean encourages Alice to skip school? What? How exactly is Summer supposed to cover for her with her teacher? So yeah, that's what I had written. And of course we covered the Summer part earlier in the episode. But yeah, Sean, and it's telling because he's so far in his own head, he probably didn't even realize she's at school. He's not even in there. There you have the picture of his mental health just by the act of him reaching out to her when she's supposed to be in school. And she could have said, give me an hour or whatever. I don't know how late in the day it was, but yeah, that's my cringe.
And it's my hot take as well, because my hot take on the show is almost always that Jimmy has done something unforgivable and everybody else is the same. This bullshit, you do not call someone's high school daughter to be the person to comfort you when shit's going wrong in your life, even if you're barely out of high school yourself. Number one. Number two, so if he hadn't hung off the water tower, they'd just be skipping school. You'd just be out there skipping school with a teenager. Because, like, you know, she says, like, I have English or whatever. And he's like, is that a yes or a no? Hell no, Sean. You know what you're doing. And you know what bothers me is they literally talked about earlier in this episode how they trust Sean. And granted, honestly, they should. But in that moment, that was not trustworthy business. That was not what you should be doing as the adult in someone's life. And I just, like, it just made me so mad because, like, if he hadn't hung off the water tower and the teacher hadn't called, they'd just be out there skipping school together.
Yeah, no.
I'm not here for that. I am not here for that energy. No, thank you.
And what is really interesting is when Jimmy says, oh, hang off any water towers lately? And he goes, oh, Alice ratted me out. Jimmy didn't go, what are you thinking taking my teenage daughter and skipping school with her? He doesn't go off on him about that.
Right, but that you're very proud of him that he didn't. And his response was so clever, right? Because the writing on the show is so fun. You know, it can be a little surreal. You know, oh no, I followed the water tower on Twitter and I was just so stoked to see someone hanging off of it. Like, what were you thinking, you know? And like, so Jimmy calls him to task for his sake. Even though we all know that, like, Alice is a part of this for Jimmy, Alice is a part of this for Paul, and honestly a part of this for Sean as well. He didn't react like an angry dad at a bad boyfriend. He reacted like someone who cared about Sean.
Yeah, totally. So this week for Carina's cold water, I struggled to come up with something, and so I'm going to talk about something a little adjacent to this. And that is Sean's risk-taking as a parallel or a dichotomy or whatever you want to call it to Brian's unwillingness to take a risk. So I find it really clever when show writers do this thing where they have characters experiencing the opposite of the challenge that the other character is facing, as if to emphasize the theme. And it's cleverly enough done that it's not hitting you over the head with a frying pan about it. It's subtle. You almost go, hold on. Oh, this is a show about taking risks, and everybody's doing it. Paul is going to tell his daughter, you know, it's all there. And so there we go.
Well, what a better descriptive word for some people. I tend to almost, well, I'm ADHD, right? So like crisis lights me up. Right. And like it like I feel the safest when I'm in crisis. It's
a weird
wild
thing. Yeah.
You would almost think that Brian is someone that would enjoy some risk-taking behavior. Just, you know, you sort of assume people who are happy like that, like, aren't afraid of things, but a lot of them are really afraid of things, you know? And so I love this dichotomy too, that, you know, Sean in that moment I love that you called that out. That's so brilliant that, like, Sean is taking big risks to like try to connect again, to like feel something, and meanwhile Brian's over here completely unwilling.
Next up is our segment where we provide some resources or an article or something you can look at if you experience some of the issues that we saw highlighted in today's show. And since this is the theme, taking risks, I learned some fun facts when I was reading some of the research items. It includes things like risk-taking includes things like these: antisocial behavior, criminal activity, stealing, vandalism, trespassing, deliberate self-harm, severe or excessive dieting, compulsive overeating, using illicit drugs, having unprotected sex, sexting or posting sexually explicit content on social media, engaging in extreme sports, gambling, betting more than you can afford to lose, driving too fast or driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, getting into fights, I'm looking at you, Sean, or even skipping school, looking over at you too now, Alice. And some of the causes of risk-taking behavior may be thrill-seeking. And some people are just thrill-seeking. They're not doing it for other reasons. They like the adrenaline rush. A lot of cause of risk-taking is substance abuse, which is in itself a risky behavior, but also the use of these substances can definitely contribute to even more risk-taking. There's peer pressure and social influence. If friends are doing it, or if it's a trend or challenge on social media, you might see people doing things that are just really unsafe. And then people with mental health challenges. Those with ADHD are prone to risk-taking because they tend to be impulsive. I know this one very well. I also have ADHD. And so today, what we're talking about regarding risk-taking behavior is that behavior associated with PTSD. So for help for that, if you're experiencing concerns about yourself or a loved one, there is the NAMI helpline. It is a free, confidential, nationwide service that provides one-on-one emotional support, mental health information, and resources needed to tackle tough challenges you or your family or friends may be facing. Or you can look through their self-help online resources below to find your answers. Dial 1-800-950-NAMI, NAMI, or 6264. Also, to assess risk-seeking behaviors, you can find help at Safe Supportive Learning. That is the website safesupportive learning-technical-assistance/education/level/higher-education/assessing-high-risk.
Nice. And we'll put those in the notes as well.
Yeah, they'll be in our show notes for anyone who, couldn't follow me on that.
Just for fun resources, for things. We talked a little bit about how great the music is in this show and how it really kind of moves the plot along, especially last week's episode and this week's episode. And if you're on Apple Music or Amazon Music, you can listen to a whole season 1 playlist from the music for this season. Spotify also has the Shrinking playlist, which so far is fire. So if you're on any of those streaming services, that's a way to kind of, you can get that bop in your life, that kind of Bill Lawrence sort of happy background music that Tom Howe did such a beautiful job of creating and curating for the show. Yeah. And that's our time.
That's wonderful. That's our time.
We will see you next week for Reshrinking the podcast.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Reshrinking is with Carina Cooper and Holly Hurley Feather. This podcast is produced by HHF Strategy and Carina Cooper, and music is by Sean Shen. If you're enjoying Reshrinking the podcast, please like, follow, and or subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Also, if you can leave us a 5-star review and a positive comment, it will help future shrinkers find us and help us grow. And then you'll have even more people to talk to about shrinking. It's a win-win.